been in a silo for so long. I was just doing Magento. Didn't have to worry about composer and namespaces and all this really sort of modern professional stuff. So there was a lot of learning that had to go in that, and that journey I think is not going to stop anytime soon. PHP continues to evolve. If you're paying attention to any of the RFCs that are being accepted these days, the language is continuing to mature into a really professional, I'd say a professional grade language. A lot of professional features. I'm lucky that my job gives me the chance to hang out with people like Sarah Goldman, formerly of Facebook, who's the author of Hack Language, I think, well, along with others, but that was a really interesting meeting for me. I walked up behind this woman at PHP Tech several years ago, and I looked and I said, I've never seen that syntax before. And she said, yeah, it's because I'm writing it. And that's how I met Sarah. And you've got these great, brilliant people driving the language forward. And I'd say that's what we're trying to do with Magento 2. Magento, that translates, that's good.
Sounds better actually.
Yeah, it's Magento. I have another story. Remember, I'm so tired right now. I'm going to just ramble for the next. No, I have bullet points, but remind me to tell you about the story about Steve Wynn and Magento. It says a lot about, I think, the name and the brand. Yeah. So we're, if you've been, I think I heard a couple people, if my German wasn't too bad, I think I heard a couple people say that you've been working with, sort of looking into Magento 2 already. And in a moment, I'm going to ask what you think about it. We're going to turn the cameras off. No, it's important because ultimately, so the DNA of Magento 2, it comes from Magento 1 in so many ways, right? If you dig into, I think I was trying to look up, someone had a question on Stack Exchange about totals rendering, or totals calculation. And so the funny thing is I look at it and I'm like, well, surely. So there's this epic post. If you search for GraphViz, if you don't know, it's a neat little tool. GraphViz and Magento totals sort order. You will find this epic post. I think it's on Stack Overflow, and it's just like someone threw up black spaghetti on the screen because all of the totals calculation is really, it's actually quite complex because you have all of these competing priorities. And everything is sort of positioned relative to another thing. And that's because in some places, so German, Andreas von Studnitz had a great presentation on taxes, German taxes, which now that I've attended his presentation, it's no wonder that it took us so long to get him right in Magento 1. And for those of you about to say you never got it right in Magento 1, hold your tongue. But in some places you have to tax the discount amount. In some places you don't. In some places you tax shipping. In some places you don't. So setting up these kinds of prioritizations and rules for processing and sort of kind of like, I guess, sort of compounding how tax calculation works. Yeah, it's a tough spot. But anyway, you go into Magento 2 and I'm like, surely we've done something really smart. We have really, really smart Ukrainians. They're great, great people. And they're very thorough. They're pretty dedicated to the craft of development. And so I get in there and I'm like, oh yeah, I can see it's different now, totals calculation in Magento 2. And then you go down a level, step into that dependency injection, and guess what? You're right there with Magento 1. And that's really the story. Essentially Magento 1 was ported forward into the Magento 2 idiom. So a lot of that stuff is there. Now, of course, we had to make some changes in some areas. Some things have been refactored. Actually, several things have been refactored. So if you look at the product type, right? So creating new product types in Magento 2, I think is much more clear. You don't have those muddied waters like in Magento 1, where you have you have this product, sort of simple product type, and it's kind of confused with configurables, and then you have bundles, and then you have downloadables, and so forth. But what we're going for was, take what we have that works, update it as much as we can, change the things, the big things that needed changing, and then add in all of the new good stuff that developers are doing in PHP, testing, and of course the full dependency injection. Now, doing this required us to build this massive architecture around it, and bespoke. Totally, it's a nice, if you don't know, it's a great English word that I think I've only ever heard used to describe clothing and websites. But yeah, the question came up at Developers Paradise. Why did we create our own dependency injection architecture when so many exist? And it's because if you actually step in and see how much that is being called, we have to make it as absolutely performant as possible. And the only way to do that, at some point, you have to drill down and make it custom. And as it turns out, there are other technologies we could have relied on, and they would have been a bad idea. So we wanted to take the new stuff that PHP people are doing, Composer, dependency management, all this stuff. We essentially wanted the story that we were telling, user story. As a professional modern PHP developer, I should be able to open up the Magento 2 code base and not go. That's part of what we're going for. And then, of course, we want to make it. We recognize that a shop system is integrating with everything, and that people, whereas our application may have an opinion about how the commerce domain works in certain areas, you, as a developer, another user story should be, as a developer, I should be able to substitute in whatever I want. As long as there's an interface I can work off of, everything should work. That is about as well as I think I can distill the goals that we had for Magento 2. Now, you may have been involved in some software projects, you all, and there's the goals, and then there's where you are. And we're in a really interesting time. Fundamentally, I can say that this company, especially the new Magento, it's really nice that we're out from under eBay. eBay helped pay for Magento 2 to be built. So we owe them, I'll shop on eBay before I'll shop on Amazon. Just for that, I'll give them a couple of nickels here and there. But it is really nice that we're able to, our strategy is entirely concerned with ourselves and our very limited sphere of partners, and of course, our community. And the community is really where we have to get it right. Like if we don't make Magento 2 the best thing to use for commerce, the times that have changed, there's something that's changed from the time of Magento 1 to Magento 2. There really wasn't anything, there were no competitors here. This market was just sitting there, just waiting for something like Magento to come along for, 6 or 7 years. I started playing with OS Commerce in 2003. And that's really what a lot of people were doing. If you had to bang something in, we had a custom, the web shop I was working for, we had a custom ZF 0.9 sort of component framework that we'd made. And when we needed e-commerce functionality, we just bolted in some OS Commerce. And you had to do all sorts of special things to get that to work. That was it back then, 2007, 2008. Now, there's a lot of really good competitors out there. I hear great stories about Shopware from the developer seat. Plenty of people are able to do a lot of stuff with PrestaShop. And some people are talking about, and some people for simpler needs, I think even WooCommerce does a pretty good job. And then of course we have our competitors in the SaaS space. So we've got, of course, Shopify and BigCommerce. I don't know if there's an analog here in like a German specific analog.
SAS software.
Yeah. So like a SaaS, basically like what I would think of as a Shopify, but really established in Germany. Yeah, I don't.
Shopware makes a good job.
Yeah.
So that's not.
But if you go for SaaS, like he said, it's plenty markets maybe.
Plenty markets. Is it German?
It's German.
Okay.
Custom.
No.
But they are focused on multi-channel.
Okay.
So it's
Well, it's all multi-channel these
tried
days.
too or not?
No.
Magento was a Magento Go.
Yeah, or as we call it around the office, Magento Gone. Magento. This was actually, as you can imagine, as evangelist. Like, by the way, it sucked. I knew about cloud for so long, and it really sucks to be around people that I've come to know. Actually, I mean, I've seen Benno probably more than I've seen my wife in the last year. I'm kidding. She travels with me, but maybe I'm not kidding. Actually, I should do the math. It's bad. That should be my litmus test if I'm traveling too much away from the wife. Like, do I see Benno more than my wife? What was I talking about? Something important. Oh, Magento Go. So Magento Go. So this is as a developer, like, who had grown up caring about Magento. Like, really, because that's what happened. In fact, you guys are to blame. Really, I'd say Germans are to blame, right? For my enjoyment of Magento and my getting indoctrinated, getting washed in the waters of open source, like the true open source ethos. Like, that's the whole Magento community, I think, has benefited from the early involvement, the early enticement of the German community. That spirit of giving back and collaborating and sharing information. So not having to sit on the secret of Magento Cloud, like knowing it was coming, and sitting in these meetings and going, what about this? What about this? What about this? And like, well, Cloud solves that. Cloud solves that. Cloud solves that. Cloud can solve a lot of problems, assuming that we're building it correctly. That announcement comes out. The thing I was terrified was that all of a sudden we were going to get all these Magento Go comparisons. But it is truly, our approach is PaaS, not SaaS. Platform as a service, not software as a service, right? Because where Magento Go failed, it failed for a lot of reasons. I only know this from the outside perspective, but I was teaching a lot. About half my time I was teaching for Magento, so I was very often in Culver City having conversations with them. Where Magento Go failed, really, and I think this was one of the final, when Roy and team realized that they could never provide the level of customization and flexibility in Go that they could in Magento as an actual installation. That's when they shut the project down. They did their best. There's a guy named Jonathan Barry who was trying to work on the kind of open social plugin system that was supposed to be the bridge, and they just never could get it there. So we were smart when we became an independent company, and we hired one of the guys from Forrester, a guy named Peter Sheldon. And you can see his intro. It's from Imagine this year. It's got a beautiful Scottish accent. It's just great to hear him talk. He could read a manual. He could read this introduction probably better than you or I. And he's one of those thinkers, and he thinks all the thoughts, and that's why I guess he was a Forrester analyst. And the approach, we did a lot of consultation with community and partners to find out what works, how we should build this. And we realized, of course, and the cool thing is, since even a few years ago, when Go was around, really the commodity computing has really come into its own, and it's really possible, I think, now to build really amazing platform on top of this just generic commodity. By the way, there's a guy in Australia, his name is Ben the Cry. He's got these great stickers, and it's a little cloud with a little frowny face, and it says, "There is no cloud, it's just other people's computers." But that's the whole point, you just push that off onto stuff. I always sucked at the DevOps side of things. When I was at Blue Acorn, we had a guy and then a whole team of people that did that stuff. So that should be a platform to build off of, and it's great that you know it's coming around in the Magento 2 era. Right now, you know, it's targeted to bigger enterprise businesses, but you will see an iterated offering off of that gets down the market pretty far actually. And we're building those tools for we're building the tooling for developers. Like we have to make developers be able to use the product. And that brings me, somehow I've managed to tie it all back together. I should be jet lagged more often. Brings me back to what's really important right now, getting going with Magento 2. So we have really, really smart developers who've been working with Magento 1 for a really long time. These people they're in very successful agencies. They have continuous integration workflows and architecture and all this stuff. And when I'm with them at hackathons and they're trying to install Magento 2, it's kind of a pain. Like they're spending an hour or two trying to get the software up and running. That's not a good story. Now there's a lot going on, and maybe some of it is solvable with, you know, we can use Docker or there's a number of good Vagrant solutions out there. But fundamentally, as a developer, you know, developers, we're lazy, right? We don't want to work too hard. We don't want to repeat ourselves. We want to make sure that you know, we've got the right tool in the hand. You know, it's the difference between grabbing a pen and trying to drive in a nail, or you just get a hammer and give it a good whack. That's what developers like. So for existing developers, you know, we do have a kind of a grit our teeth and we'll get through it attitude. For new developers, I think it's pretty scary to come into Magento 2 because there's a lot going on. So that gets me to where we are these days. We are communicating in earnest with our community. So if you are not following Alan Kent, that's our chief architect. Alan Kent is, I swear there's 3 of them. There have to be, because he's writing a book. He's being chief architect, and he's also present almost at all hours, engaged directly on Twitter with developers. You know, someone says, you know, the Magento 2 front end sucks and I want to stab the people who created it. He'll jump in, say, well, I prefer to not be stabbed, but, you know, tell me what your problems are, right? You know, he's focused on making this Magento 2 thing, you know, the platform that it should be. So one point, in case you've never noticed, you all probably, this crowd probably has figured it out. Magento 1 or 2 it's a PHP framework. You take off all of the e-commerce and you're left with a framework. This was done with Magento 1. It's like a Mage Lite, I think is the name of the project. Takes off all of the e-commerce stuff, and you're just kind of left with this, really, once you know how to use it, a fairly rapid development framework. With Magento 2, you're trying to make that even more the case. So Magento 1 has a couple of just little odd hidden dependencies. Magento 2, even when you're trying to render something, like even the framework itself is one of the dependencies that's provided in that application context. So Magento 2 really is more than Magento 1 was a framework, and then we use that framework to build an e-commerce app. And then you all can use it to extend the functionality, create new functionality, turn off functionality, whatever. So with that description in mind, what we're trying to get right now is get that platform where it should be. And what we're hearing, so here's what I'm hearing, and we benefit from having a just amazing self-organizing community. You know, I don't have to plan this. I just, you know, come to Berlin, take a train to Hamburg, and You know, I show up and there's a stuff. I go to meet Magento events. They happen. We have people participating online, sort of ad infinitum on GitHub. We have a very dedicated and vocal community who, you know, is pretty keen to tell us where we're going right and where we're going wrong. And so a lot of my conversations these days, when I show up at an event, go something like, Ben, I really hate this in Magento 2, or why did you do this in Magento 2? But then, very often though, those same statements are followed up with, but you should know, really, really like it. It's actually, I feel like I'm working with a good, you know, a pretty good software, especially compared to Magento 1. Like it's more robust, it's more professional, etc. So based on this entirely subjective, unscientific, you know, collection of information, I'm willing to say that in general, developers are positive on Magento 2, but there are a lot of rough edges for us to work out, right? Now, don't get me wrong, there are several sites that are up and running. There are some people building some really interesting and cool stuff. There are aspects of the framework that have been taken advantage of already. You know, it's possible if you want to switch your entire templating engine over from PHTML to Twig or to Smarty, you can. You can do it with one line of XML and a parser for that type. Basically one line of XML and a parser for that type. It's been done already. So we've demonstrated really a lot of success, but you know, everyone, you know, I think people expect a lot from us, and we, you know, owe it to ourselves and to you all to live up to it. So for those of you who have started playing with Magento 2, I will open up for you to ask any and all questions. This is your chance, and what I'll do, what I've been doing. So I've been doing this a little bit already in previous talks, and what I'm doing is I'm taking your input, your questions or your feedback, and if I can answer it, I will. If not, I take it into the product or engineering teams, get an answer, and I'm aggregating everything through the end of this week. And next week, I'll put up a blog post with answers, you know, with the questions and with the answers, just to really so that other people can benefit from it. All right, so who wants to ask the first question about Magento 2? I'm staring at you because I can see.
No, I haven't worked with Magento 2 actually, so I have no question.
Well, that's great. So as far as you know, it's perfect. Awesome.
I could say something.
Please.
Because we have one Magento 2 project, and what was mentioned at the Developers Paradise, for example, that there was one statement that you actually should hire like Magento 1 developers and take new ones that have more experience with Symfony and stuff. I don't think like that, because our experiences, we like dependency injection. Everyone can learn it. It's not the problem.
Yeah.
I'm not concerned with the project myself, but what I got from my developers is that there's a big problem in compiling all the front-end stuff. And it's not just a problem, it's quite expensive.
Wait, someone's monetized it? I'm kidding, sorry, it's a bad joke.
Yeah, actually
bad
we
joke.
have time tracking, you know.
Yeah, it's literally, it's costing.
And he has money, and we're like, okay, what do we pay?
Compiling, 10-minute increments of compiling, yeah.
And you know, when a developer is compiling or doing something, he's like 2 hours. I heard something like 2 hours compiling stuff.
Wow.
He's doing nothing else in that time.
Oh, with this, but there's posts on Reddit to go through. You can go to Magento Stack Exchange and help out your fellow Magento
Actually,
developer.
At Huda, it's like, you know, you're waiting when it's compiled, and when it's ready, you're going to take a smoke.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you know, so we just want. So did anyone know Java? Anyone ever do any stuff in Java? No. Java, you know, it's a programming language.
It's in 5 years.
Yeah. So look at the Magento 1 architecture and tell me that that does not smack of like, hey, let's hire Java developers and get them to write a PHP MVC framework. I mean, it's exactly what they did, right? It's what they did. You know, I learned more about like Martin Fowler's patterns of enterprise architecture from like looking at Magento source code than I did from anything else. So really, we wanted to provide that genuine Java experience. The only thing that was missing was compiling.
You know, but the Java thing is more concerned with the backend.
Yeah.
But the problems we have, you know, when you're an agency and you're customizing Magento, I learned it, Magento, then the most tasks are concerned with the front end. Because
Yeah.
this is the biggest part on customizing. And that's what I heard from you, like 2 hours compiling or welding or something like that. Perhaps it's our infrastructure.
Yeah.
But there are some things that are really frustrating because you're like changing one CSS property, and then I don't know, but something must happen. It takes a lot of time, and then you can test it. And if it was wrong, then you have to do the same process again.
Yeah, there are some. So this is, you know, I knew this was bound to come up. I'd say this is the roughest spot right now, and you know, if I may, I'll throw in some conjecture. You know, we didn't build this architecture for the M2 front end. We didn't build it like to say like how much merchants' money can we waste. You know, we certainly, at least I'm pretty sure that I didn't see that on any of the boards in Kiev, the office. So what we did do was we had a couple of challenges. We know that there are CSS workflows. We know that there are, you know, sort of two big approaches to making modular CSS and making it maintainable. I mean, when I was by the time I'd left Blue Acorn, actually, of course, like I swear, 2 weeks before 1.9 came out with the SaaS theme, the UX head there, our front end head, had built this entire SaaS sort of boilerplate, really, for us to get projects kicked off. And the really cool thing is when you build something like that, you know, you really can say, okay, well, this is a you know, the comp for this site, it's basically a white on black. You know, so it's like a dark theme, or it's an orange theme, or whatever, and you can really get going quickly. And once you know those conventions, like you understand the approach of that, you know, the mix-ins that are being used, etc. You can really, the front-end developers could do their work quite quickly. And M1 didn't do anything to that workflow, the tooling. So this is something, you know, front-end has gotten way the hell away from where it was when I was having to do it. You know, again, if I needed rounded corner buttons, guess what? I'm gonna break out my image editor and slice it, right? I mean, I know it's definitely not how it's done now, right? The kids are using all the new stuff. But looking at, you know, by the time I'd left the company, I'm looking at front-end developers who've come in, and they have these great tools where they're able to, you know, make a change in their SaaS, you know, their SaaS definitions, and just everything, you know, the browser automatically refreshes, so they got a little, like, you know, little gulp going on, they got a little node happening, but their workflow is very quick. Like, I make the change, and browser refreshes. I can visualize that change rendered within a couple seconds. So this is Magento. This is talking Magento. I'm sorry, I did not mean to give you that much hope.
I think we just had it today.
Yeah.
The SaaS theme.
Are you
Where it did
less?
No, for Magento 1.
Oh.
Magento
With-
1.9 is
The SAS thing?
That thing, and Compass takes about 15 seconds to compile.
Really?
Yeah, and it's quite annoying.
Yeah, no, you don't. Yeah, it's 15 seconds. Those add up.
But that's maybe the tool chain or something. Maybe you should use that or something. Don't know.
Yeah, I mean, so a person you might reach out to is his handle is Complex Things on Twitter. His name's Greg. That's my front end guy that I worked with at Blue Acorn. Still there. Fantastic person. Cares about his craft. So yeah, I would say please reach out to him. Just like you can feel free to let him know that I said hey to ping him, because I'm sure they've got a solution for that. I will write that down. By the way, I'm not just up here playing Angry Birds.
So we achieve this stuff that if you do a change in your CSS file and the browsers just react and refresh themselves with Magento 2 too. It's possible. But sometimes if you do change, you refresh your browser and everything is messed up. The CSS is gone entirely. There's no JavaScript anymore, and no one knows why. And the only thing you can do is to delete your generation, your DI, and all the pub static files, and recompile everything again from scratch. It's the only thing that works.
Okay. You're talking about 2 or 1?
2.
That's
2, yeah. So there are a lot of things coming together. You've heard of the term like perfect storm, Bermuda Triangle. No. There are several things that are happening, and it's actually so. I should go back and qualify. Part of the difficulties that developers were having getting Magento 2 installed earlier this year is because we had that release where we got very opinionated about file system permissions. We got really opinionated about file system permissions because we have very smart Ukrainians who know what the hell they're talking about. Unfortunately, the reality is, as we found out, most server environments just aren't set up for it. And certainly a lot of developer environments aren't set up like that. So we know, it's a weird case where we know something to be right and proper, sort of academically, but from a usability standpoint, we had to kind of claw that back. With Magento 2 front end, there are similar stories. Like there's a couple of things going on. So I can speak to the delay, or the sort of the lengthiness in compilation. Right now, any theme that you have, basically visible, and localization, that's going to add to the compiling time, whether it's being used or not. The application doesn't know. That is probably something for us to fix on our side. And that may even be being worked on. Another thing that comes up, and it's strange depending on who you speak with, because people can get pretty dogmatic about less versus SAS. And for some people, it's a really big deal. Like us standardizing on less or building our themes on less is, we have really betrayed the trust of front-end developers everywhere. Others, they're just like, yeah, we don't care. Like, whatever you're doing, that's fine, but we need room for our tooling to work, and we need it to not, we need to not have to wait 10 minutes to visualize changes. So, if we kind of dig down a little bit deeper, what's happening, I think, is, first of all, there is a historical reason for standardizing on less. If you look in the vendor folder, there is the Oye Jorge, and that's a package, and that is a PHP processor for less. There was not one for SAS when we started doing this. So we wanted, I started to say this earlier, we wanted essentially, we basically wanted 2 workflows to work. We wanted the people who really weren't going to change much, don't have a developer side workflow that they would work with, and that way the server can do all this stuff for them. And then we also wanted to facilitate the developers. So essentially there should be theoretically 2 workflows. for using our front-end architecture. But I think what we've realized is those are kind of blocked up, and that there's a couple of reasons for that. We have these custom variables, and there's all sorts of magic voodoo that happens based on naming conventions with these variables. And it makes it very hard to take that Magento magic. Basically, if you're trying to build off of our theme, our base theme, it makes it very hard to work with. That's just a fundamental, that's a fundamental issue right now that probably also has to be solved. Now, solved doesn't necessarily mean it goes away. Solved may mean that we just say, hey, this is how it's done in Magento 2. Here is ample documentation. There's also probably some tooling. So like when I'm on site with my buddies from Blue Acorn in Charleston a week or so ago, and they're saying, look, I'm trying to find where this value, this CSS value is set. And they're grepping, they're just grepping the whole file. And it takes them a while to find where these variables are being declared. And then you have these very complex chains of variable declarations, right? This all, it's sort of, it's like meta cascading, right? But it's also, it's all, unless you know it all, it's really complex. I'm reminded of Layout XML. Hated that shit, hated it, until I knew how to use it. Because once you know how to use it and you see how the system uses it, then you've got a really powerful tool in your tool set. Wednesday is always my favorite day in the Magento 1 fundamentals class. I taught that thing about 40 times, right? 5-day course. Wednesday is rendering day. And when I had students in the class who had been working with Magento for a little while, and we got into the Layout XML, I could flip the lights off because there's just all these light bulbs going off the entire class. But essentially, I'm giving them the keys to one of the best tools in the framework, and maybe this is what we need to do with Magento 2 front end. There's probably some refactoring, rejiggering to be done there, but also I think education can go a long way. What else? Can I think of anything else? So, but then if I step back a little bit, I say, fundamentally, if you want to rip out, and I've heard some people have just been ripping out front end in Magento 2, and they're sort of going at it their own. Also an option. Snowdog Apps, they have a fantastic, they've essentially SaaSified basically SaaSified and promised to maintain the front end for Magento in their own projects. If you go under Snowdog Apps on GitHub, if you go under Snowdog's account, you'll see this project there. And we're actually.
We are using SAS for Magento 1.
Yeah.
For 2.
I mean, now, and so this was also a very confusing thing. We had an outside team build the Magento 1 theme, and they did this with this SAS workflow, and then of course we come out with Magento 2 and it's less, and everyone's just like, really? But for a lot of people, I think it also felt like the prototype jQuery thing again. I've also heard something that like someone was saying that, jQuery is really slow. And jQuery UI, I mean, that stuff hasn't been updated in years. I don't know. Of course, that follow-up, I asked, what should we be using? Don't know. There's like...
Henning, what should you use instead of jQuery?
I don't like Java.
Vanilla JS, yes, my favorite framework. So these are, for things like, some of the front-end tricks and fun stuff that we have to do. Yeah, I mean, I talked to some guys somewhere in the world within the last week, and their team is doing, they're going to Foundation. They're building out a whole bunch of Foundation stuff. Now, there's other stuff to think about as well, like if you get into the checkout, Magento 2 checkout, if you're actually walking through that workflow, and you're like, holy, there's like 300 requests going back and forth. There's a lot of stuff happening there. You really should be using HTTP 2. That Magento 2 was built for it. And if you're throwing that many requests around, the assumption is that's the protocol in which you're serving it. Otherwise, you're going to get some blocking and some serious delay. And then, I haven't even touched on testing. I mean, let's see, I've got, when did I start it? When did I start? I didn't even know.
You started.
I didn't look. It's fair.
Past 7, some.
You really should have hired a professional to come do this.
Sorry for that.
Okay.
Next time.
So front end, I can tell you. Well, let me put it out there. I get to see my boss once or twice a year. He's based in California, and I'm sure not. And we were all meeting with some people in Berlin this morning, and he kind of made me aware that as much as I know, like Alan Kent is really looking hard at the front end. I think the front end is our biggest challenge to solve right now, our biggest, most immediate challenge. That we're really looking as a company at the platform and really wanting to make sure that it is this, this sort of useful tool that it needs to be. And so I think you all will see and hear about that in the very near future. And that's all I can say about that right now, but you'll see and hear about it soon. Yeah, and I haven't even touched on things like, fun things like testing. This was also something that we never did in Magento 1. At least, I used to feel badly about it, especially once I started going to PHP conferences and you got guys like Grumpy Programmer, the only angry Canadian in the world, and he's this tall and bald and he points at you a lot. And, thinking, gosh, we should be testing. And then as I go around and I ask audience after audience, like especially of Magento people, like Magento 1, like, who's doing testing? And it's usually less than 1% of the people in the room. I mean, it's not like we're not making embedded defibrillator software, right? So, I mean, no one probably is literally dying if something breaks, if you have a bad deployment. But, we've probably all had, I've pushed my fair share of breaking releases, especially in the early days. Back and edit on the server? Sure. Those were the early days. But you push a breaking release, and then it's like you find out that there is testing going on. It's just your client's customers are telling your client, and your client is telling you. So that's your QA cycle there until you get a nice sophisticated, you hire QA people. So I don't know if you want to talk about that? We can. I mean, there's a lot going on in Magento 2, right? Especially if you've been living in that Magento 1 silo like I was. If you are a professional, like modern. Okay, yeah. So aside from this guy, if you're a modern PHP professional, hopefully you can look at Magento and go, okay, Stefan Hochdorfer. So he is. I forget where he's based. He's German. I know because he has umlauts in his name. I remember he came to me. I was speaking at Sunshine PHP in January, and we'd run into each other at PHP conferences, and he said, "Hey, thank you for making Magento 2. We have a Magento 2 project already. We actually feel like we can use this one." I was like, wow, because Stefan, I think he's doing some stuff with like Satis, and I mean he's a pretty serious programmer, and that he's signing off on Magento 2 when he used to just give me shit about Magento 1. These are the kind of endorsements I like to hear. But I want to make the tool better for him.
Okay, but what I actually like to hear is how is it going on with Magento 1, because I think some retailers could be get some uncertainties about it because of support and development, functional development, and all that stuff. Is there a roadmap for Magento 1.9 at the moment, but perhaps for 1.10 and stuff?
There's a roadmap. It says dead end.
Okay.
I mean, we're not doing any more features. We personally are not building any more features or don't have any plans to build features for Magento 1. It is an end-of-life product. We will patch like sort of P0 bugs, and of course we'll patch. I don't think there've ever been any security issues with Magento 1, but if any come up, I shouldn't even say that in front of you because I'm sure you spent some money on that. No, but yeah, if other security issues are noticed, so and this is through 2018, November of 2018. So we wanted to give a ramp. And we of course we talked about it. We want people on Magento 2 as soon as possible. I mean, it's good to have that momentum. It's good to get that critical mass moved to the new product. But we also knew that we couldn't be jerks about it and just say, okay, you've got 6 months. Because people for sure would just be like, okay, while I'm evaluating Magento 2 as another platform, let me look at all of your competitors. I mean, people are going to do that anyway. You're daft. This is where I don't work for sales. You're daft if you don't look at, because if you have a Magento 1 shop and you're considering Magento 2, you should probably take a look at what's around. And hopefully, Magento 2 is compelling. I mean, that's our job, is to make that product right, and also to help move, facilitate the community and all the support and everything that has to go into community support that has to go into making Magento 2 a workable, a viable option.
It's about migration. I think that's the biggest problem. When we have a customer, we say them, okay, just wait with Magento 2. We don't do it yet because we don't do it now because it's too hard to migrate at the moment. Is there something coming up, or we just we think that we have to do it from the scratch again? That's a bit the problem, and we have so much customizations in our Magento 1 shops.
Yeah, so we didn't want to leave people hanging. So the nice thing about Magento 1 to Magento 2 is it's certainly not an easy, I'll say, it's not an upgrade like going from a minor release in Magento 1 to another minor release in Magento 1. So like going from 1.13 to 1.14. Or maybe 1.12 to 1.13 is a better example. But with, the nice thing is, as a Magento developer, if you have experience in Magento 1, there should be a lot about Magento 2 that you recognize, at least as a backend developer. Models, resource models, collections, that's there. Layout XML, it's there, a little different. But really, all we've done is we've just broken out all of the layout update handles into their own files, right? It's more modular. It's actually a little more academically correct to do it that way. And interestingly enough, you can actually script a lot of the migration of, you can script converting Magento 1 code to Magento 2 code, provided Magento 1 code was done to a certain standard. A tool that can be built will pull out hard-coded dependencies. So like if you're using mage get model, like if you're using the God class inside a function in your class, you can actually fire up a tool that will do namespaces, basically convert things into pull in namespaces, will essentially implement the Magento, or re-implement your Magento 1 code as Magento 2 code. Now, the extent to which, and by the way, we have this tool. It's under our GitHub account. So we have a code migration tool. We also have a data migration tool that'll move over products, categories, customers, and orders, I believe. And I believe I've already heard of people extending this. Some people have tons of sales rules that they are tax rates, whatever. I expect that, yes, over the next probably 6 to 9 months, we'll see, as more and more people are faced with these migration challenges, they'll probably contribute to our migration tools. But as from a business standpoint, there's two things that have to happen for you to consider moving from Magento 1 to Magento 2. We have to make it, well, aside from Magento 1 hitting the end of life, and then you've got to pick something. Magento 2 has to be a compelling product. That means when you, especially, it's probably an even easier case to make for enterprise, because enterprise is going to see more features more often, more new features more often than community. So community is still the base of Magento EE. And we have to implement some changes even in order to make the necessary changes that we want to make in EE. In other words, we have to implement something new and better in CE in order for it to exist for EE. Now, anything performance related, we're always going to put into the core. Anything scale related will always go into enterprise. But we have to build the features that, basically in your mind, I think that you just sit there and say, okay, well, I'd like this, and I'd like this, and I'd like this, and oh wow, all three of these are in Magento 2 now. And so that essentially offsets the cost. Like if you had to build those features out for Magento 1, you're building into an implementation that is by definition going to be dead in a couple of years, and you're investing in the past. So being able to say, hey, maybe that's 20,000 euros in development costs that I can just throw out now, because if I move to Magento 2, I get that stuff for free.
Yeah, that's...
Um,
It would be everything for free. We don't have a business value as an agency.
Yeah. Well, no, but I mean, thing is, so there's still, the thing is, there's still work to be done. I mean, I would assume, as an agency, you're doing the same things like we always did. If there were an ideal extension that satisfied a client's requirements, it was never a question. We're not gonna sit there and pretend it doesn't exist just so we can build that thing ourselves. That doesn't do us favors. I mean, we had plenty of work. It didn't do us any favors. Doesn't do the client any favors. I mean, really, that extension that is in more places, that's been battle tested on, hundreds, thousands of sites. That's the thing to use. And that also gets into, so another thing to think about when you think about going 1 to 2, Magento 1 to Magento 2, all of a sudden, cloud becomes an option for you. Because it is the Magento 2 code base, same as you would get from us to install in your own environment, same code base online. It's also the advantage of the new marketplace and the new set of extensions. So it's not just the features that we're making. It is hopefully the fact that you all, especially so as a business owner, you're an owner? Worker. Okay, so as a business, but you're running the place, so we'll say that you own it. So as the person responsible for things, you can say, well, I want to use a new feature. I want this feature from this extension. Magento 1, that we have a great term in English for it. Magento Connect could be a bit of a shit show. Shit show. I'll let you. It doesn't really. I don't think this kind of thing exists literally, but. Magento Connect, there's 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 extensions in there. There's like 50 options for a Facebook like button on your product page. This is confusing as hell for merchants. This is, and overwhelming majority of the stuff, the code in there, in those extensions is just rubbish. Right? I mean, it is. We know that. Magento 2 and the new Magento Marketplace, we host all of that paid code. That's the thing. I mean, we can't, Magento Connect, we can't even control commercial code. Like if it's sold, you're getting it from someone else. We don't get to review that stuff. So Magento 2, we actually have, it's automated code review, it's doing static code analysis, it's doing general code quality, it's also checking for plagiarism, so that we don't have people stealing each other's stuff and undercutting each other. It is extensions in Magento 2 with Magento Marketplace are robust, should not cause any issues. And then you sort of get to sort of compound the benefit by thinking about the testing environment. I mean, at the very least, you've got unit tests covering the core. So if you install an extension and it doesn't have unit tests of its own, personally, I would love to see all extensions being required to have unit tests. I don't know if we're there yet, but at least unit tests. But at least you'll know if the core breaks somehow. So there are compelling benefits. Magento 2 as a product. When you see 2.1 come out in the near future, you'll start to see some of these feature releases. We talked about the roadmap at Imagine. That video is online. So we've got things like enhanced CMS. You already have some new features, like if you have peak traffic and you need to offload some really expensive processes. There's RabbitMQ, basically job queuing integration or job queuing implementation. Staging is coming. Yeah, this is where a marketing person, if they were in the room, would be like, dude, Ben, how do you not know our bullet points? So yeah, but staging, well, and actual staging, like staging that really works well. Actually, you can already scale database. So you can already like split off to multiple data, like do MySQL clustering, cool stuff like that. It essentially just means to higher availability, essentially scale. But we are, and then we have, I don't know if you guys are in the B2B space, but business to business module, that's going to be an add-on to Enterprise Edition. And that'll be out probably this year. I won't make promises about timelines for sure because I'm not product. By accident, and the head of product made it very clear. He's a nice guy, but he made it very clear that I should not be doing that. He used to jump out of airplanes a lot. He was a little crazy. So, yeah, I hope that wasn't too rambly on a warm. Is it Tuesday?
Tuesday's today.
Tuesday, yeah, on a warm Tuesday. But if you get nothing else out of this, hopefully you know how to find me on Twitter, Ben Marks. I'm Ben at Magento.com.
There's this story about Steve Wynn and Magento.
Thank you. That's why I put that out there. So I'm offloading. You said something about the name Magento, right? Forget the context in which it was mentioned, but so we actually the Wynn Hotel. So Steve Wynn, you got to understand this guy. So there was the old Las Vegas. You can go see it. It's the Strip. It's humble. You can see just the oddest bits of Americana there. It's the only place I can afford to gamble in Vegas. The Wynn is very expensive. It cost the hotel. I forget how many rooms it is, but it was $5 billion to build that hotel. Like, holy crap! But Mr. Wynn, this is the guy who went out, when there was just old Las Vegas. He just went out to the edge of old Las Vegas and just stared out at, the cusp there at the desert and came up with the vision of what you see now, like all that hangover stuff, like from the movie, like the huge behemoth buildings and everything you see now on the Strip. That was all basically Steve Wynn's vision, right? And he made it happen. So we're at Mr. Wynn's hotel. He's got, and he actually is pretty legendary in the business world for treating his employees well, empowering them, and just sort of getting them to buy in and care about it. And you can actually see it. I mean, when you see them dusting the crown molding every other day, it's quite an operation. But so we actually, from what I understand, we had a different keynote speaker scheduled for our last year's Imagine. And that fell through. And so somehow the idea of Steve Wynn does he does keynotes. Mr. Wynn, it's in your house. You feel like speaking. So he comes out, and keynote speaker, when he comes out to a podium, I am no Steve Wynn. You can quote me on that. We'll do this. No, Steve Wynn, he was on the other side, and he just leans on that podium. And he rambled on and on. It was the most hilarious thing I think I've ever seen. Dude, he was like your drunk uncle. Like, he just no qualms about politics or anything. I liked Obama at first, but now he's basically taking all the money out of my pocket. I mean, he's just going places you just don't go. But everyone's like, oh, it's like my drunk uncle, so it's kind of funny. So we end up having this just absolutely hilarious, atypical keynote. And he's a good guy. Like, we paid him, and whatever we paid him, he just donated to his favorite charity. But the favorite part for me was, and you have to, if you don't know, last year's Imagine kind of sucked from a Magento standpoint, because we weren't, like, if you looked anywhere, like, none of the banners said Magento. It was all like eBay Enterprise, because we were splitting out of eBay and we wanted to stress our togetherness. That didn't last long, but so we wanted to stress our togetherness and everything. We didn't want to. So it was Imagine. It wasn't Magento Imagine. It was just Imagine. But Steve Wynn comes out, and he is just like, every other word out of his mouth is just Magento, Magento, Magento. He assumes like everyone in the room actually worked for Magento, which is great. But he's just, Magento, Magento, Magento. Find out afterwards. So this is the trip. We have our production, we put on a hell of an event. Even like Magento Live, the production value, the Magento Lives, which are much smaller, great. Imagine is off the charts. Imagine is absolutely an incredible time. It's just an incredible experience. And it is so because we have a very good events group, and they make sure everything, we have thought leadership team there, everything, like the narrative, everything's just decided and just defined and well curated. Steve Wynn knew nothing about Magento, doesn't really know anything about e-commerce. He had a 15-minute introduction, that's it, on the phone, with, at the time, our chief marketing officer and like the head of marketing internally. And they're telling me the story later on. I'm pretty sure there were a few beers over, just over this thing. And they're talking about like Steve, they're trying to say, eBay Enterprise, eBay Enterprise, eBay Enterprise. And then someone on this phone call, this 15-minute phone call, says to Steve Wynn, someone just says, yeah, well, it's Magento. So we've got this Magento thing. And then Steve goes, wait, stop. What was that? What was that? And I said, well, so this is like eBay Enterprise, but this conference is really focused on Magento. It's Magento. Magento. That's magical. And this tale still gets told, around the halls of various Magento offices. So it says a lot, though, because the brand always was Magento. I mean, eBay and PayPal, they tried to do so much with sort of to kind of put Magento off on the side and build it into this other little thing with the fabric and X-commerce, all this stuff. And Magento just always kept, getting kicked around a little bit, but then it rise right up to the top every single time. And look at the darling, they got spun out with eBay Enterprise and then spun out of eBay Enterprise. And we're on top. And we're on top, two reasons. One, we got a great name, Magento. But we're also on top because we've got a community that cares, about their clients, customers. We've got, and cares enough to give us feedback, as long as we're smart enough to listen. So that's probably enough blathering for me. If you want to blather later, though, I'll be blathering more. I tend to talk about Magento ad nauseum. So thanks. I've got notes. Feel free if you do have some input or questions now or later, just let me know. Again, I'd like to include the stuff in a blog post for the benefit of the broader community. Thanks for having me in Hamburg.